So today we are going to tackle one of the biggest questions there is, but we're not going to do it through philosophy or faith. We're going to look at it through the lens of science and the really dedicated work of a unique team of researchers at the University of Virginia.
For over 50 years, half a century, the university's Division of Perceptual Studies has been collecting and systematically investigating thousands of cases. These are experiences that suggest consciousness might be a whole lot more complicated than we think. Okay, let's dive in.
The way I see it, their research really falls into three main categories, so we're going to treat each one like a file in a bigger investigation. A file full of evidence that just doesn't quite fit the standard scientific rulebook for how the mind is supposed to work. All right, let's open our first file, near-death experiences, or NDEs. You've probably heard of them. These are those profound, often life-changing events that people report when they are right on the brink of death or even clinically dead.
And this is where we hit a really fascinating paradox. At the exact moment the brain is seriously failing, sometimes with no blood flow at all, people report that their thinking has never been clearer or more vivid. But some of them report something truly baffling, having accurate perceptions from a viewpoint completely outside of their physical body.
Let's look at a specific case that UVA documented. There was a 55-year-old truck driver, a guy named Al, and he's having quadruple bypass surgery. All of a sudden, he feels himself just float out of his body. And from up near the ceiling, he sees this really peculiar sight. His surgeon is flapping his arms. Now, here's the kicker. When a researcher later asked the surgeon about it, he confirmed it. It was this quirky habit he had to direct his team without touching anything non-sterile. There is absolutely no way that Al, unconscious on the table, could have known about that. And look, this isn't just a one-off, oh, that's a neat story kind of thing. A survey of over 100 NDE cases that involved these out-of-body claims found that more than 90%, 90 of the details people saw and reported were completely accurate. Okay, let's move on to our next file, and you'll see how this puzzle gets deeper. This one contains over 2,500 meticulously documented cases from all over the world of young children who report these vivid, incredibly detailed memories of a past life. Just listen to this case. There's a 5-year-old boy from Oklahoma named Ryan. He's looking through a book on old Hollywood with his mom when he points to a picture from some 1930s movie and says that he points to one guy, calls him George, and then points to another man, an extra with no lines, and says, "That's me." So the researchers, with some help from a Hollywood archivist, actually figured out who the man was, a guy named Marty Martin. And then they went and verified over 50 of Ryan's incredibly specific statements about Martin's life, from dancing on Broadway to the street he lived on. Ryan even corrected the official record of Martin's age when he died. How does that happen? But the connections can be more than just memories. Sometimes they're physical. Some children have phobias that are directly related to how the person in their memories died. And even more startling, some are born with birthmarks that correspond to fatal wounds on the deceased person. They've documented 18 cases where a child was born with 2 marks that matched both the entry and the exit wounds from a bullet. Just let that sink in. Our third and final evidence file is about a phenomenon known as terminal lucidity, and it's this sudden, totally unexpected return of mental clarity in people right before they die. And we're talking about people whose brains have been physically ravaged by disease. I mean, destroyed to the point where coherent thought and communication should be flat out impossible. And yet, for a brief period, they're back. A physician named Scott Haig wrote about his patient, David, whose brain was riddled with tumors. After being completely unresponsive, David suddenly woke up, recognized his family, and actually talked with them one last time before he passed away. So this phenomenon just directly challenges the assumption that the mind is simply what the brain does, right? Because if the brain is shutting down, if the hardware is failing, how is the mind suddenly able to function so perfectly? Okay, so let's put all 3 of these files together on the table. We have the NDEs, the past life memories, and terminal lucidity. When you look at them all at once, they really force us to question the most fundamental thing we think we know about the relationship between our mind and our brain. You see, the standard scientific model is something called physicalism. It basically says that the brain produces consciousness. It's like a factory producing smoke. You turn off the factory, the smoke stops. Simple, clean, end of story. But the evidence from these UVA files just presents a huge challenge to that idea. I mean, if physicalism is the whole story, how do we explain any of this?
How can people think clearly with no blood flow? How can a little kid remember a life they never lived? How does someone regain clarity as their brain is literally being destroyed? It just doesn't fit. And this is what leads the UVA researchers to propose a different model. What if the brain doesn't create consciousness, but instead acts more like a receiver or filter, like a radio receiving a broadcast signal? Now, if the radio gets damaged, the music gets distorted or it might stop altogether, but the broadcast itself is still out there. In this view, damage to the brain doesn't destroy the mind, it just messes up the mind's ability to express itself. And this is really where decades of this fascinating research have led us. Not to a final, tidy answer, but to a much bigger, much more profound question. To be clear, the work from the University of Virginia doesn't prove there's life after death, but what it does do is show, with some really compelling evidence, that the mystery of who we are is, well, it's far from solved.